Everyone, today we're going to be talking about something called function composition, which it's going to be kind of an interesting aspect. It's going to be basically a couple day lesson for us dealing with a lot of different information. So understand that today our goal is going to be to take two separate functions and do different operations with them. Now, there are four operations that you have in math in general is addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. In today's, we're just going to focus on addition and subtraction. How do we take a word problem? How do we take two separate equations? And how do we actually combine them to get a single one using those values? Okay. So to start to solve, let's just look at it like a typical problem that we can see. This one says Jim Green has lawn service called Green Grass Guaranteed. Tori and Steven are two of his employees. Tori earns $10 per hour. Steven earns $8 per hour. Jim sends Tori and Steven on a job that takes them 4 hours. Okay. So basically what we want to do is figure out an equation for Tori and Steven to start that's going to tell us how much money they earn based on the hours they work. So the first thing I want you to understand is the representation. These symbols are very important. Understanding that T of H is very representative and S of H is very representative. Okay? T of H is going to be the amount that Tori works per hour. So we have Tori and we have the hours. Well, she earns $10 per hour. Okay, so what this notation here is telling me is it's basically saying that Tori, the T, is the person I'm talking about, while the value on the inside is my actual variable, the hours I actually work. Same thing here. This is saying Steven, H-A-N, and same thing, the H is going to be my hours they actually work. So Steven is $8 per hour. Okay? So in number two, they're basically saying, well, if they work 4 hours, how much do they earn? So once again, I want you to understand notation. T of 4 is going to be like saying Tori worked 4 hours, and that means she earned $40. Okay, because 10 times 4. S of 4 is like saying Steven worked 4 hours, which means he earned $32. Okay, 8 times 4. Well, number 3 is basically saying what happens if I add them together? Well, pretty easy enough. This would be Tori every 4 hours plus Steven after working 4 hours would be the same as 40 plus 32, which is 72. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Like a lot of us could probably do that in our head. It's pretty easy math there. Okay, but let's start building off of that. Let's just say I didn't care about how many hours I worked. Let's say I was a manager and I just want to be like, okay, how much total money do I need to pay both of you? I don't want to know the hours. I just want to know an equation that I can use to just plug a number in and get the total. So what we're going to look at is this situation. So we have something called a function rule, which if I took two separate functions and added them together, I can create this function, which basically understand, if you think about this, T of H plus S of H is the same thing. T of H plus S of H is the same thing as like saying T plus S by the hours. Okay? This is just a shorter way to write this information. Okay? So if you think about it, all this would come out to be would just be the 10H plus 8H, which is just 18H. So see how I'm just adding those functions together, and that's really all it is? Well, that's the whole idea of this lesson, is that I'm really just taking a function composition of two values. So down here, what does the function T plus S of H represent in the situation? It's going to be the total money earned based on the hours. So now we're not talking about Steven, we're not talking about Tori, we're talking about the total. And so when we talked about the total amount of hours, we said there was going to be $72 total made in 4 hours. Okay. We had 40 from Tori, 32 from Steven. Well, if you think about that, find T plus S of 4, How does that compare to your answer? Well, this is going to be the same thing as this. Okay? So these values are equal. And that's kind of the key thing they want you to see and they want you to understand is that these values are the same. Okay? So now it's basically saying how much will Jim spend on Tori and Steven earning a 4-hour job? Well, it's just $72. So really, if you think about that, I'm just taking two separate functions and combining them together, creating a singular function. We call this function composition. Now, we're going to go ahead and skip a lot of this and just jump right down here to where we have number 12. Because I want you to basically understand, like, how can I actually work these values out? How can I actually use them? Well, let's just say I was given a problem like this, where they give me three different functions. We have f of x, g of x, and h of x. Okay? Well, if I want to actually add or subtract these together, I would just have to follow the same rules I have given to me on this problem. For example, for letter number 12 here, a is just f plus g of x. What this is telling me to do is take f of x and add it to g of x. So easy enough, f of x is going to be 3x plus 2, and I'm going to add that to my g of x, so there's my f of x. My g of x is 2x minus 1. And then from there, I would just combine like terms. 3x plus 2x would be 5x. 2 plus negative 1 would be positive 1. And I'd get my total function composition. Okay? Now, please note, this is with the addition value. Subtraction, we do have to take a little step back and actually understand, like, how is it going to differ? So, let's look at a subtraction function. If I look at letter D here, which is f minus g of x, once again, that's saying that I'm going to take the f of x and I'm going to subtract it from the g of x. Now, here's where it becomes very important. We have to understand that we are subtracting this whole thing. We're not subtracting just one value, we're subtracting the whole g of x. So if I take those same two functions, f of g of x, so f of x was 3x plus 2, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract it, and I'm going to write parentheses in the second value. We're going to subtract it from 2x minus 1. The reason I did this is because we have to be smart math students and understand that I'm not just subtracting this first value. I'm subtracting this whole thing. So when I think about this, when I actually write this out, I want to actually subtract those values. So really, this is 3 minus 2x, which is x. Okay, or 1x, however you want to write it. On top of that, then this is like saying 2 minus negative 1. Well, negative minus a negative 1 is going to be positive 1, so we're going to get x plus 3 as a final answer. Okay? And that's really what we're going to be talking about in the lesson, and we're also going to talk about in class. It's a pretty short overall day. We're going to take our time with these because I want our operations to be right. Okay? The key thing I want you to understand is that this is what we call function composition. Now, this is just addition and subtraction. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about multiplication, and eventually, we're going to talk about plugging equations into each other. Okay, there's a lot of different ways we could actually solve these problems out. But this is kind of step one. Okay, being able to understand how to add and subtract two functions together. Besides that, go ahead and make sure you're answering the questions, and we will discuss this tomorrow in class. Have a great day.